as we endeavor to look into the Word today, remember that this world is not our home. There are aspects of life that kind of get in the way. When you think about it, life gets busy, and we can spend an awful lot of time doing things that in the end really don't mean much, because this world is not our home. So as we continue to look forward, and I do believe it's a safe promise for me to say this is the last week that you'll see this slide is the opening slide. If you're getting tired of this opening slide, then this is next week will be your lucky day. But one more week of looking forward, as we've been looking forward in these past few several studies, several lessons. Hopefully it's been edifying. And, we started out looking at, what we can do individually. Looking forward, how can we better serve the Lord? How can we better serve the church and its purpose here on this earth, which again supersedes the purpose of anything else in our lives. Our first goal should be to seek and save the lost, just as Christ sought to do, that we would plant those seeds. So as we looked at that, and we've looked at the structure of the church, we've looked at the need for that structure and the need for deacons and the need for elders. And now we're going to talk about qualified elders and think a little bit about that. We talked about the qualifications for deacon a few weeks ago. And as we look forward, as we go through the next period of our lives here, Lord willing, and we have breath in these coming days, we want to be looking forward in such a way that we look at ourselves and ask ourselves, do we meet these qualifications? Can this happen in this local assembly at this point in time? As we understand from the scriptures that an assembly that does not have elders and deacons has something lacking. And as those that are seeking to please the Lord, I hope that we want to be those that correct those things that are lacking. And we should be looking towards that end and thinking within ourselves, is this something that I can do? Is this something that I have a desire to do? And if not at this time, then how can I align my steps with the Lord's in such a way that when the time comes, when I attain more of these qualifications, that I can step into that role because the Lord desires that these roles be filled in His church. And so there's something for us to think about as we continue our daily walk. Looking again, as we have in most of these lessons, 2 Peter 3 at verse 14. Therefore, beloved, looking forward to these things, be diligent to be found by Him in peace, without spot, and blameless. Something for us to think about and take with us as we look through this lesson. We see evidence of course, deacons and elders. We talked about that. Philippians 1 at verse 1 speaks to both deacons and elders at the church at Philippi. And so we have that evidence that we've looked at a more in length in previous lessons, and you can continue to look at those things. So as we move on, and we now want to look at the character and the habits, I suppose you might say, of an elder. Now, back in June of this year, we did have this lesson before. So if this slide looks familiar, I stole it from that lesson in June. It's good to, again, go back and think on these things because it is something that the Lord desires for His church. So we revisit it again for just a little bit here today. 1 Timothy 3, the first 7 verses, says, "This is a faithful saying. If a man desires the position of a bishop, he desires a good work. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded, of good behavior, hospitable, able to teach, not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, but gentle. not quarrelsome, not covetous, one who rules his own house well, having his children in submission with all reverence. For if a man does not know how to rule his own house, how will he take care of the church of God? Not a novice, lest being puffed up with pride, he fall into the same condemnation as the devil. Moreover, he must have a good testimony among those who are outside, lest he fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. Moving on, just to read the scriptures here, and then we'll talk about some of these points. Titus 1, starting at verse 6. Titus 1, starting at verse 6 says, "If a man is blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of dissipation or insubordination. For a bishop must be blameless as a steward of God, not self-willed, not quick-tempered, not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, but hospitable, a lover of what is good, sober-minded, just, holy, self-controlled, holding fast the faithful word as he has been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and convict those who contradict." Now, as we think about what happens in any group of people, we understand there has to be somebody that kind of watches to make sure things are going smoothly. If you work in any kind of occupation, I would venture to say that there's probably somebody, maybe it's you, but there's probably somebody within the organization that kind of oversees and makes sure that things are going according to plan. That perhaps in the business sense, you'd have a business plan, and you would make sure that things are being taken care of in such manner. You know, you think of perhaps a will. May we write out our wills, the things what we want to be done with our earthly belongings after we leave this earth, and the executor of the will make sure that those things are put in place as directed. And the Lord knew that this was a necessary thing in his church as well. He knew that there would be a need for those to watch over and to make sure that things don't go askew. Because any group of people left to their own devices and their own desires without guidance from the scriptures will go off, inevitably, they will sway off into the other lane, perhaps. You know, thinking of driving in here today, sliding around a little bit. If you didn't keep your hands on the wheel, you might find yourself in the other lane. There had to be some direction there. And the Lord gave us his direction in the scriptures, and as a part of that, he desires that there be those in the local church that have these habits and this character about them, so that they might be able to rightly guide those in a local assembly. Now, some of the words that we see there in the list, blameless, doesn't mean that they're perfect, but means that you can't point your finger and say, that guy's a scoundrel. I understand that guy would cheat and steal from his own grandmother. You know, that kind of thing. You don't want to be said about a person that would have that kind of place in the Lord's church. That person does not have a place, have business to be in a place of leadership, pretty much, probably anywhere, but most of all the Lord's church. Sober. Now, you know, we take that word sober to mean not drunk, not taken with alcohol, but there's a certain seriousness that is meant by that term, a seriousness to life. Not that you can't have some fun along the way, not that the person has to go around with a sour look on their face all the time, but that they take serious things seriously. That they know when it's time to get down to business and handle the things that need to be handled. That takes some fortitude at times. It's difficult to be the one that makes correction. If you're a parent, you know this. It's not an easy thing. It's not fun, anyway, to correct your child. But you know that if you don't, there's going to be trouble. You can see the evidence of that in society. Having done what I have done for so many years previous to preaching, I saw a lot of young people that did not have direction, that were off the tracks, gone off the rails, so to speak. They did not have a sober-minded person leading them in any way. Being hospitable, the next thing on our list there, being one that is welcoming to people, that can take care of the needs of people and is willing to do that. It's more, I take it more of a willingness, showing that their care for people. You know, what better way to show your care and love for people than to take care of their needs? And you know, it's really something to take someone into your house and be hospitable to them. If you've ever done that, it can be uncomfortable to have people moving around in your space and moving things. You know, when Angela and I moved into our house, before we had children, we were under this, at least I was. I don't know if Angela so much got on board with this, but I was under this impression that things had their place. You put the couch here and it stays there. That's like where it's meant to be. And the color on the wall stays the same, and that everything has, you know, the cups go in the cupboard in this certain way and so on. And I've been broken of that by children to some degree, but nonetheless, when someone is in your space and moving things around, and you know, that can be taxing, and it can be difficult to be hospitable because of those thoughts that we have in our minds. But we have to get over that, and we have to be, of course, we understand a lot of these things are things that every Christian should do, and every Christian, I dare say, should be hospitable. They should be those that are willing to allow people into their lives in such a way that they can have sway over them, that they can teach the gospel to them, that they might be able to plant some seeds. You're not going to be able to plant seeds, you know, and not be hospitable. If you're not hospitable, you won't be able to plant seeds well. Being temperate, being well behaved, those two sort of kind of go together. Being temperate, being those that don't just fly off the handle, being even keel. And that kind of goes in with well behaved, not getting into trouble, not, you know, the people that you can think of in your lives that you've come into contact with that were not temperate. They were ill-tempered perhaps, and they most likely were not well behaved along the way. They got themselves out of control from time to time. We see beginning to see a picture of a person who is in control of their emotions, in control of their mind and their will. Gentle is another one, and I know this one, sometimes we don't think of that when we think of an elder in the church, but gentleness is something that we should see. I think oftentimes some get into this position of elder, and they think that they need to be cracking the whip all the time, and that they need to be harsh and too serious about things. And the picture that we see is one who is gentle, one who is able to speak to others and not, and this is admittedly an art form, being able to speak to people without making them uncomfortable if that is possible. To show that to speak in such a way to show that you care and not just always barking rules. That's a difficult job. It takes some effort to be able to do that, to be a gentle person. When you task yourself or have been tasked with the idea of watching over anything, sometimes mankind seems to get a big head, and they become anything but gentle, and that's something we should think about. If we desire the job of an elder, we need to be those that are gentle, and that is something that each should work on. Even just any Christian should work on that, because we aren't going to, again, win anybody's heart, win anybody's soul for Christ if we aren't gentle and nice about the whole process. We need to be a lover of things that are good. You know, if we we all have things that we love in life, things that we get great pleasure out of. And we should get great pleasure out of those things that are good. And we should not allow ourselves to get pleasure out of things that are not good. There's a whole lot of things that are not good out there. I mean, just turn on the television and you will see all manner of things that people get themselves involved in. You know, I'm not that old and I'm not that far removed from society. I'm out there most every day and seeing people and talking to people, but we haven't had cable TV in our house for some time. And when I travel and I turn on the television and I see the commercials and I see the things that are put out there as entertainment, I don't see a whole lot of good. And I see an awful lot of people that love those things. And that's a scary thought. But that ought not to be in the church. That ought not to be, especially of those that desire the position of bishop or elder. One who is just as well, holy, not violent, not greedy. You know, those things kind of speak for themselves, being just. You know, not being one that is easily swayed with the desires of mankind, but seeking to do things the right way. Holy, being those that are after godly things, to put it simply. Not violent. There are story after story of leaders, not in the church, although I'm sure there are some examples, because the church has people in it. But throughout history, we can see a history full of people that were leaders in some way that became violent in that leadership. That they didn't exhibit some of these other tendencies. They weren't perhaps sober and blameless and hospitable, temperate, well-behaved, gentle, lover of good things. And so in leading people, they became vicious. They became violent. And we only need to look at history and even around us in the world to see what happens when someone is in a place of leadership and they just want to get their way. Not greedy. You know, it's pretty evident in the religious world, the popular religious world, that there are those in places of leadership, in assemblies that call themselves a church and the church, that have fallen victim to greed. And that just shouldn't be. That desire and that love for money. There are names, you know, of televangelists that probably pop into our head, people that have been popular and have gone down and been put in jail because of their greed. Another character or habit would be one who is not quarrelsome. You know, there are those people out there that are just looking for a fight. They enjoy the adrenaline rush of getting into a battle with somebody, and that isn't the kind of person that should be in an eldership either. Not covetous, not looking at what the neighbor has or what other people have, not desiring more than they have. You know, there's something to be said for being happy with what you've got. You know, the other day, watching a television show, it was a tour of what is supposed to be the largest home in the country. I don't know if that surpasses the one in North Carolina or not, but anyway, that's the way it was billed on this television show. It was a huge house, just huge. And looking at all of those shiny things, you know, there are many that is their goal, to have more shiny stuff, to have a bigger house, to be able to have the next biggest thing. And it's been said many times, and I think if you take an honest look about you in the world, you see those people that are just scratching after that next big thing, the newest thing, the fanciest thing, that they're just not happy. They're just not happy. And no wonder the Lord desires that the leaders of his church not be that way. Not given to wine. This is a sticky one in the world because wine is very popular. It's a very popular thing. Now, someday we'll get into a lesson again on alcohol and what it does, and kind of start looking at the context of alcohol in the scriptures. To put it simply, and as I probably mentioned during our discussion of deacons, the alcohol that is out there today does not compare to the alcohol that is mentioned in the scriptures. The distillation process, the process by which alcoholic spirits are made today, yields a much higher amount of alcohol in the drink. And that just was not the case in the first century. And if we see the way that wine was used in the first century, it was used as a purification agent in very small quantities. And in fact, there's good evidence that the fruit of the vine, is just simply that. When we gather here in a few moments for the Lord's Supper, we're going to take of the fruit of the vine, which is unfermented, just pure fruit of the vine. And that is what we see being served. In the wedding at Cana in Galilee is often pointed to as a time when Jesus served wine to everybody and got everybody drunk. That's what people think. But it was new wine. It was the good wine, as it was mentioned. It was not the old sour stuff that would be getting people drunk. So, in context, it's no surprise that those in the leadership of the Lord's Church should not be given to wine. I can tell you from my interactions in life, and I imagine that you can think back in your own lives and think of those that were given to wine and how unstable their ways were, how unstable their lives were, how they would put themselves in a position where on some days perhaps they just weren't any good. Like they couldn't get up out of bed. They couldn't operate as a human being because of the substance that they put into their body the day before or earlier that day. It's nothing good comes from alcohol. As I used to tell my students in the driving classes, name a person that has done better for their life by being drunk or being given to a substance, an intoxicating substance. There isn't one. You might find someone who has spent their life in that condition and maybe is wealthy, but are they really happy? Are they really a person that, would you really want to live that life? And if you really honestly take a look at it, I don't imagine that you would. Not self-willed. Again, it's the will of the Father, the will of Christ, not our will that we want to be seeking after. And the same thing for the leader, those that would be leaders in the Lord's church. Not quick-tempered. You don't want somebody who's going to fly off the handle and go into a rage of emotion and anger when things happen. If you've noticed in your lives, if you have friends and acquaintances and family, and we all do, sometimes people disappoint you. In fact, it happens quite often. I mean, if you're breathing and you're alive and you have friends, you've been disappointed by a person. And that happens even amongst the saints. And we need not have a person in a position of leadership that is quick-tempered, that is ready to fly off the handle and looking for a fight. So there we have this picture of the character and the fitness of one who would be called an elder. So as we look forward, again, to cover these things, elders should be known by all as God-fearing, God-seeking men. All men should take heed to those qualifications. In Ephesians 6, starting at verse 10, says, "Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places." Verse 13, "Therefore take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand." Each and every one of us has that charge to to put off these things of worldliness. Now, one never knows what the future holds. As we sit here today, perhaps you sit here today and perhaps you don't meet all these qualifications at this time, but think forward. Look ahead. Look forward is the title of the lesson has been. Look forward and plant your steps in such a way that someday you can fulfill that role. Someday you might have attained enough age to have a family, to rule your own house well, to exhibit these characteristics. And you want to be able to step into that position so that the Lord's church can be well served in whatever area you're in. You don't want to disqualify yourself from future needful service to the Lord. This maturity that we see a picture of maturity when we look at all of these qualifications for an elder, or for that matter, for a deacon. Maturity takes time, and it's coupled with diligence. One that has produced fruit that is proven over time. 1 Timothy 3:6, not a novice, lest being puffed up with pride he fall into the same condemnation as the devil. A novice is one that is newly planted, a new convert, a neophyte, someone who is inexperienced. That's not the person for this position. Jesus alluded to the importance of this proven fruit in Luke 8, verse 15. But the ones that fell on the good ground are those who, having heard the word with a noble and good heart, keep it and bear fruit with patience. That's the beginning, starting to bear fruit and then patiently continuing in that. And that's the proven fruit that we need to see in those that are perhaps that would seek the position of elder. Looking forward to a godly family as we go through our lives, as we make our decisions, we strive to be those that make those choices with the scriptures in mind. Being the husband of one wife, literally meaning a one-woman kind of man. That there's no place for a person that is a philanderer and runs around and decides to have relationships with multiple women or men at one time. That's for any Christian. That's sinful. And for those that would desire the position of elder, they have to be literally a one-woman kind of man. It's the position prescribes marriage. You must be married to be a husband. It's said that they need to be the husband of a one wife. That excludes females because God said so, not because I said so. Not out of some hate for women, but it is what the Lord desired for His church. So you have to be a husband of one wife. You must be married to be a husband. And then, how long does a marriage last? In a marriage ceremony, you often hear, until death do we part. At that point, the person is no longer a husband. When they no longer have a spouse on this earth. That union of man and wife is an earthly thing. It is not something that we expect in the heavenly realm. But anyways, one who is to be an elder should be the husband of one wife, not a polygamist, so to speak. One who rules his own house well, as we already read the scriptures pertaining to that. Having obedient children, willing to submit to parental authority. And then this kind of dovetails in with faithful children, having faithful children. There's the faithful children that seek godly things and that are obedient to the gospel of Christ. That's a good thing, but also are his children seeking to be pleasing to him? Are they faithful to him, to the Father, that they have on this earth. And that's an important thing, because if the father is a godly man and he's seeking to put his footsteps in such a place that he can be pleasing to the Lord, then he's going to lead his children in that same direction. And that puts the whole family in a position where they're most likely going to be safe. They're most likely going to all be obedient to the gospel of Christ. There may be a man who has young children, who has already raised some children, but still has some young children at home that have not obeyed the gospel. But are they faithful to him? Are they able? Do they show the fruits of being led in a godly direction? I think it's important personally, in looking at this, I think it's important that the person's children be faithful to the Lord, most of all. But I see that there is some room for the idea that they need to be faithful to the man himself, who is their father. The two are connected. The being faithful to the Lord himself, that one I think can stand pretty much on its own. But, dovetailed in with that, we have the idea of being faithful to the Father himself. And that of course, can't stand on its own. I believe it's important that especially if the person's children have attained an age of being able to understand, I think it's important that they also show that fruit because of the direction that they've had in their life. So, as we look at these things and looking at obedient children, not out of, children not being obedient to him because of some compulsion, but having been raised right, or having a love for the Lord, having a love again for their father as well. It's one thing to be able to crack the whip and make your children do what you want them to do. It's another thing to have them desire to want to be pleasing, a desire to want to be with you and to walk that path with you towards heaven. It's parallel to our walk with the Lord. The Lord, he left us to our own free will, if you will, when he instituted the church. We still have our free will. He's not down here cracking the whip. He wants us to be those that follow him because we want to, because we have that heart and desire to be pleasing to him. And that same parallel I think we see when we look at the interaction of an elder with his children. Again, what is his track record with those under his direct care? 1 Peter 5, starting at verse 1, for just the first 3 verses. The elders who are among you I exhort, who am a fellow elder and witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that will be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion but willingly, not for dishonest gain but eagerly, nor as being lords over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. Again, there has to be that willingness for the man who desires the eldership. Not out of some compulsion, not because he's the only one that fits all the other qualifications, but because there's a desire to lead the local church that he is among in a godly way, to be that one that kind of sticks their nose out. We understand that one who desires to be an elder and is over the assembly in a local area, they carry with them a little extra judgment. They have a heavier burden on their shoulders in some ways because they're going to have to answer for their actions, and it's a serious, grave thing to be in the position of elder in the Lord's church. It's a wonderful thing. In fact, we read earlier that if a man desires this work, he desires a good thing. But let's not forget the gravity of the situation. Again, with having faithful children, we kind of talked about that, not accused of dissipation or insubordination. Being believing, convinced that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. I think that's a very important thing, aspect of the person's family. That their children need to be convinced. Not that they have been baptized and gotten wet because it makes the dad look good, but because they have that desire and that knowledge and faith in their own hearts that this is the right thing to do. Again, an elder should be able to faithfully teach. Must be, again, 1 Timothy 3:2, blameless, the husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded, of good behavior, hospitable, and able to teach. There should be the ability to stand up or to sit down with somebody and teach the Scriptures. And there's a difference between presenting and teaching. If you are going to teach something, you should have a good understanding of it and be able to show someone the truth in the Scriptures, not just present. What I'm doing here today is presenting, hopefully a little bit of teaching too. But there's a difference. You've heard it said, and sometimes people joke and say, if you can't do it, teach it. Well, that's not really the way that we should operate. We need to be those, especially those that would be a bishop, an elder, need to be those that have an understanding and are able to teach because they have shown that they can do these things, and they have an understanding, a deep understanding of what must be done. A shepherd feeds the sheep in his care. You have children in your house, you feed them. At least I hope you do. I know that sometimes doesn't happen. It's heartbreaking. As all of you know, my wife is a teacher, and I hear stories sometimes of children who, they gobble up whatever they can at school because they know there's not food at home, and that's a sad thing. A shepherd feeds the sheep in his care. One who cares about his flock. One that doesn't just discard both his family and those that he is in the care, charged with caring for. Think of Peter's discourse with Christ. Do you love me? Feed my sheep. Peter went on to do just that. So must the elder in the church today. Again, I think one of the issues that we run up against, this was mentioned in the Bible study class earlier, as we look around us, one of the reasons that so many people are lost is because they have that lack of knowledge, lack of understanding. Hosea 4:6, my people, at the beginning of the verse, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. That was true then, it's true now. If there is hope for the Lord's church, it's going to be in each and every one of us to understand and have the knowledge, be able to teach it, be able to emulate Christ's walk on this earth and his example, and to be able to follow through with his desire for his church. God cares enough that he spelled out his desire for his church. He spelled out his desire for mankind. God has told us how to get into the church where we can lay hold of his precious promises. We must I hope each and every one of us is willing to humbly obey those things, to be obedient to the Lord, not out of some compulsion of fear, but because we have a love for who Christ is. We have a love for what he's done for us, and that we understand that he has all authority and that we must obey him if we have any hope after this life is over. Are you subject to Christ's invitation? We understand from the Scriptures that hearing must be done. You must hear not just the noise of the words of the Scriptures, but understand what the Scriptures say. Believe that Christ is who he says he is, and repent and turn away from our sins. Being willing to walk in that new direction to, again, leave the world behind and seek the Lord. Confessing Christ before men, being baptized for the remission of sins, and then most of all, perhaps the hardest part of all, remaining faithful until death, as Revelation 2:10 outlines for us. Are you subject to the invitation? We stand ready to assist you, whether it be putting on Christ in the waters of baptism, or if you need the prayers of the saints. We stand ready to assist you, whatever your need may be. Please stand as we sing.